What's up, NAIA Nation? It's your boy Manny here. Welcome back to the Hoop Report, the NAIA Women's Basketball Podcast, episode number 49. One away from episode 50. Crazy to think about it, guys. But we're going to talk a little bit about the coming week here, going into the second full week of February. Obviously, it's conference tournament month. Every game has conference tournaments implications, whether it's regular season titles, whether it's playoff seedings, home court advantage, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to deep dive into a few of the games this week to keep an eye on, as well as our predictions for the polls and a few other quick hits throughout the country. We're going to start first with that. We're going to talk about some quick hit games, and then we'll do the polls prediction, and then wrap it up with some more in-depth analysis for some of the games that I think are going to be very, very important. So we will start with our first edition of Around the Rim. These are the games around the country that I think are going to be very important. You've got Nazarene versus IU South Bend, Indiana Tech versus Lourdes, Rochester Christian versus Siena Heights. Those are all be played on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we've got Rio Grande, Midway, William Carey Faulkner, Langston College of the Ozarks. You know, a few of these games to deep dive a little bit more into. Olivia Nazarene and IU South Bend. The reason that's a pretty big game because I think that is Olivia Nazarene's last real test. If they win that one, I think they all but clinched the the regular season championship in the Chicagoland. When we're talking about Indiana Tech and Lourdes, those are the top two teams in the WAC facing off. For Rochester Christian and Siena Heights, it's a big game when we're talking about conference standings for the playoffs in terms of home court. Because when we talk about the standings, Rochester Christian, obviously, they were in the battle for the top of the conference, but now they're tied right now with Aquinas at 14-4, and Siena Heights is right behind Rochester Christian at 11-7. So Rochester Christian loses this game, you go down to 14-5. You're not that far off from getting the 7 games in the loss column, so things can get a little interesting towards the end of the season. And then on the other side of things, you got Rio Grande and Midway. I think it's a really good test because Rio Grande has struggled a little bit with Midway, not in terms of maybe an upset brewing, but definitely something to keep an eye on. William Carey Faulkner. Can Faulkner bounce back after a tough loss against Bruton Parker in overtime? And then Langston versus College of the Ozarks, similar to when I talked about in the Rio Grande Midway game. I don't think College of the Ozarks is necessarily going to beat Langston, but I think it's a nice game to keep an eye on in terms of standings moving forward. Speaking of the SAC, we'll talk about them real quick. A lot has updated, since the last time we talked. A lot of things have happened over the weekend. For the SAC, you have now clinched Langston, Nelson, MACU, College of the Ozarks, and USAO will all have officially all won a spot in the tournament. Things will change in terms of conference standings, moving forward. USAO is 12-6. Wayland Baptist is 10-7. So there's a lot of things that go there. You also have College of the Ozarks 13-5. Mid-American Christian, who's 14-4. Nelson's 15-3. Langston, pretty much, I think a win here almost locks in the conference regular season championship. I think the Lions are going to win it. I think it's theirs to lose right now, obviously going into the last 3 weeks of the season. So we'll see what else shakes up. And there is a game for the SAC that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But like I mentioned, we're going to first hit on the polls and the predictions for our final regular season polls for this year, because when we look at the schedule for the polls, it'll come out Wednesday like always. The next one won't come out until the middle of conference play. A conference tournament action on the following Wednesday. So obviously, for those who don't know, the conference tournaments will start the final week of February, so the week of the 23rd. Most of them will start on either the 23rd or the 24th, and that 25th will be the final polls for this entire season, going into the selection show and all that kind of stuff in March. So my predictions for the polls: Dorsey's number 1. I don't think that changes at all. Freed Hardeman and Bethel, I think they have to share number 2 because Bethel got their get back against Freed Hardeman this past week, but they did lose before that to receiving was Georgetown. So I just don't see a world where Bethel cannot overtake Freed Hardeman because you have a upset loss on your resume since the last polls, but you did beat Freed Hardeman at Freed Hardeman. So I feel like you have to meet them in the middle, and I think both teams will be a number 2 in the top 25. Campbellsville, I think, drops to the edge of the top 10. I do think so, simply because when you look at it, they lost to a very tough, very impressive Lindsey Wilson team right now that is like surging, and you'll see why in a minute here. They lost Lindsey Wilson. That was technically an upset. Again, Lindsey Wilson, number 24 in the country. The other problem of this is these next teams that I'm going to mention are all undefeated since the last polls, and undefeated pretty dominantly. Marion, Dakota State, Rio Grande, Dakota Wesleyan, and Concordia. I would even throw in Mid-American Nazarene. They're also undefeated as well in the last few weeks, but the thing is they don't have as many quality wins as the other teams that I mentioned do. So I think Mid-American Nazarene would be at 11, best case 10. Like there's nothing else in that. But I think they'll stay at number 11. So all these teams I feel like could jump Campbellsville, and I think they all might. I really do. The only team that I didn't mention was St. Francis. Why? Because you might be on the edge of the outside of the top 10 because you lost to receiving votes Indiana Wesleyan at home. So I think that's going to have to hurt you a little bit, especially with everybody around you in the top 10 doing so well and some teams outside the top 10 looking to get in because, again, there are some interesting teams that are surging right now in the polls. Next three teams that I'm going to talk about, I think they all drop outside the top 15. Talking about Lewis and Clark State, who has 2 losses on their schedule in the past 2 weeks to receiving votes teams Southern Oregon and Oregon Tech. You also have Montana Tech, who has 2 losses against receiving votes Carroll and number 18 Rocky Mountain. And you have William Carey, who should drop after suffering their second loss of the season to unranked Life. In order, I think Montana Tech should drop the lowest out of these 3 teams because even though they have 2 losses, just like Lewis and Clark does, they one of the losses was to a top 20 team, so that could help a little bit. Lewis and Clark State should be the second one, and then William Carey should drop the most out of these 3 just because you lost to the only unranked team out of the 5 teams that have beaten these 3. You lost to the unranked team, so I do think that has to hold a little bit of weight in this situation. Cumberlands of Kentucky, I think you drop the most these polls after suffering a 5-game losing streak. I just don't think that you can be number 15. Still in the top 25, I would think. But, I mean, if you drop to the edge or even out, is it a little bit of a nosedive, a little bit of a free fall? Yes, but I've seen crazier things happen. So I can't not mention that, but I do think they'll stay in there, but just on the cusp of the top 25. Eastern Oregon, a lot of these teams, to be honest with you guys, I have them kind of falling because there's some teams that have been upset, in the past 2 weeks. But I think these polls are going to resemble the, you might have had a bad week, but these teams had a worse week type of thing. I think that's where we're going to see the message from these polls because Eastern Oregon, they could fall a little bit after getting upset from receiving votes College of Idaho. But in reality, I actually see them maybe going up because, like I mentioned above you've got Cumberlands of Kentucky, who's technically tied right now with Eastern Oregon for number 15 in the country. You're on a 5-game losing streak. So I think you're going to drop for sure. You have William Carey, who lost to an unranked Life team. They'll probably drop for sure. You've got Montana Tech, who lost to receiving votes, Carroll and Rocky Mountain, and then Southern Oregon, Oregon Tech being losing. Like, there's a lot of teams here that have dropped multiple times. For Eastern Oregon, you lost to one team. It was College of Idaho, who is not a bad team, who I think is going to surge in the receiving votes picture. So it probably is the best of the losses that I've talked about so far. So I think they might actually go up maybe a spot or two. That's kind of how it works sometimes. You might not have a great week or great weeks, but everybody around you has even worse weeks. You kind of benefit from, timing being the main impact player here for a lot of these teams. Talk about Evangel. They lost to unranked Bethel. I think they have to fall a little bit, but again, benefiting from other teams having bad weeks. Now, do I think, if I look at specifically the unranked teams, I think Bethel's a better team than Life. So again, it might not hurt Evangel that much. Maybe they just stay right where they're at number 17. I wouldn't be surprised about that either. So a lot of these teams, you see the trend. You had a bad week. The other teams had worse weeks. It's just kind of how it works. Then we got Spring Arbor, who I think surges up the polls. I mean, the only loss was to Marion, who's a top 5 team, top 3 team sometimes in the country. So they're going to be at least top 15. And all these teams that we talked about, we just mentioned, when we look at the polls, and I'll bring them up here for a second to kind of tell you guys and show you what I mean. We look at the polls, the teams that I just mentioned, because I always do this in order of the last polls. So from number 12 to number 17, counting Evangel and Eastern Oregon, those last 2, I've said nothing but down, and the last 2 were up because of the other downs. So I think Spring Arbor might actually get very high in these polls, y'all. I really do. Talking about easily top 15 for sure, maybe even top 12, top 13, something like that. I think there's a world of a real possibility here for the Cougars. Briarcliff, I think you fall out of the top 20 after that. Not the loss to Dakota Wesleyan, but the loss to unranked Northwestern. That's the one that's going to get you. So I think you drop out of the top 20. Then we got Friends. They think they fall all the way out of the top 25. You lost to unranked Ottawa. And again, the teams that I'm going to mention now that are going to drop out, in my opinion, are because a lot of these teams in receiving votes, they need to get in. It's time. Friends, St. Francis, Illinois, after losing to unranked Viterbo. And then Corbin after losing to receiving votes Southern Oregon. Now, that Corbin one, it's a little bit of it's just that Corbin's kind of been on the free fall lately in these polls, so I think that's kind of why it's going to happen. Not so much that it's a bad loss, but it more of like, it's time. You've lost too many. You've been falling too much. I think it's time you're going to drop out or be at number 25, be on right on the edge. And again, some of these receiving votes teams, they have a real case, y'all, and you'll see in a minute here. Rocky Mountain, I think they stay at 23 because their only loss was the number 7 Dakota State, and then they upset number 13 Montana Tech. So I think you did enough to hold the line, so to speak. Lindsey Wilson, the biggest risers easily from number 24 to 15. Done. Because since the last polls are on a 5-game winning streak, and these are the 5 teams, y'all. Number 4, Campbellsville. At receiving votes, Cumberland, Tennessee. At receiving votes, Georgetown. And number 15, Cumberland, Kentucky. What are we doing here? They need to be up there. They need to be up there because I don't see a world where you can't possibly put them not in the top 15, especially with how bad these other teams around them have been doing for the past 2 weeks. Because when you look at, I'm going to pull up the schedule again because I know I said 5 in a row and then I'm missing one, and I want to give Lindsey Wilson their flowers for what they've been able to do for the past few games. We go to the bottom. Who am I missing? Oh, Ohio Christian University. So it wasn't an NAIA team. That's why I didn't put them on there. But yeah, Lindsey Wilson deserves to be top 15 easily. No question about it. Now, when we talk about Indiana Tech, I believe they move up, especially because they're riding the strength of an 11-game winning streak right now. They didn't do anything major in the last poll, since the last polls, but it's from a bigger picture coming out and looking at a bigger picture, I think that they deserve to move up a little bit and not be on the bubble of being outside the top 25. Now for the swing votes. So I mentioned before, I have 4 teams: Briarcliff, Friends, St. Francis, Illinois, Corbin. I have 4 teams that I feel like might drop out. 3 that I think will, 1 that might or might not. So I have 4 teams that I obviously, y'all know me. If I'm going to bring somebody else, someone's got to go in. So teams that I have going in that need to be in. These are my need to be in teams from the receiving vote side of things. Langston, they get back in the top 25. They got a 13-game winning streak, and they've got wins over receiving votes, USAO, and receiving votes and Mid-American Christian. Done. They're in. Loyola, I think they get back in. Why? They have a 16-game winning streak. They've rode that momentum. Obviously, they did beat William Carey a few weeks ago. Granted, that was a couple weeks ago, but we're talking about a big picture here. These teams have really been able to build a sustained success for the past couple weeks now. The other team, Columbia, it's tough. Obviously, they have been dominating the AMC, but 11-game winning streak speaks for itself. And again, a lot of these teams are not doing very well. And I'm not talking about Columbia being in the top 20 even. I think they just got to get in the top 25, and we'll see if they stay there for the final polls. Then UT Southern, I think they move to the top of receiving votes. If you're going to put Columbia in, who's got a 12-game winning streak, you got to put UT Southern, who's got if you're going to put Columbia, who has an 11-game winning streak, then you got to put in UT Southern, who has a 12-game winning streak. That's kind of how I see it right now. The best winning streak out of all these teams by numbers is Loyola at 16. Okay, they're in. Then comes Langston, and they have the best quality wins as well, I would say. So they're in. Columbia and UT Southern are fighting for that final spot. I could see them going UT Southern because the Southern States has been a little bit tougher this year than the AMC. It's just the way it is. And then Columbia would be that final team that, hey, I could see y'all getting in. Now, that brings me to LSU Shreveport, who's my only should be in but team. The but comes in. They have a 16-game winning streak, but they were in the middle of the pack of the receiving votes. Like in the way they do it is by line. So 1, 2, they're in that third line. Again, 17-game winning streak is better than all the other teams that I just mentioned that should be in. But the problem is you are in the middle of receiving votes. So can you make that leap? Hey, I'm here for it. I understand. I would bump everybody down after that. So, instead of Loyola being number 1 and Langston being number 2 and UT Southern Columbia being like 3, I would bump everybody down to put LSU Shreveport number 1 from a strength of 17 in a row is hard. So that's what I'm looking at. If they're not, if the committee, if the selection group, if everybody that's doing the rating, all that kind of stuff is like, no, 17 games is 17 games. It speaks for itself. We put you in. Cool. I'm with it. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying, will they do that? I don't know. And if they do, how high can you really go in top 25? If you go from middle of receiving votes to 20, I feel like that's a big jump. 25, I think, is realistic, even 24. But 20 and up, to me, a tough sell. Tough sell. So that's why they're my should be in, but you're just in the middle of receiving votes. The minimum you should be is at the top of the receiving votes picture by the next polls. So it's not a bad thing, but I just feel like you missed it out just by being a little bit too far in the middle, the previous polls. Now, the could get back in, but teams. Southeastern, 8-game winning streaks. 8-game winning streak with multiple 10-plus win teams or games in that winning streak, I should say. But again, 8-game winning streaks compared to all the other ones I just mentioned, I can't see that. I can't see. If Southeastern's going to get in, then a lot of these other teams need to get in. Southern Oregon, they'll rise in receiving votes after creating a 7-game winning streak. They beat number 12 Lewis and Clark State. They beat number 22 Corbin at Corbin. They're kind of in the same boat as LSU Shreveport, where just farther. They were farther in the receiving votes picture. So now I just can't see making that big jump. It's a great resume, and it's a very strong resume. That's why they're going to go from the bottom of the receiving votes to the top of receiving votes, in my opinion, or at least top end of the middle of the pack. But it's just you're too far to start. I can't bounce you from the bottom of the mountain all the way to the top. It's just not going to be realistic. My risers in receiving votes. So these are the teams that are going to stay in receiving votes, but they'll go up a little bit. Georgetown, I think they stay or move up. Now, I know they're 2-3 in their last 5 games. I get that. I understand that. But listen to these teams. You played all ranked teams. You lost to only ranked teams. And then you beat number 3 Bethel and number 15 Cumberland of Kentucky. That is the best 2-3 record I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? So I don't think they should move down, either stay or move up. That's what I say for Georgetown. For Oregon Tech, I think you rise a little bit after beating number 12 Lewis and Clark State. And you only lost to number 22 Corbin. I don't think that's a bad loss at all. College of Idaho, you definitely rise after creating a 5-game winning streak and beating number 15 Eastern Oregon at Eastern Oregon. Indiana Wesleyan, I think you go up as well. Yes, you're 2-2, but your wins are against receiving votes Taylor and at number 6 St. Francis. And then your loss was to Huntington. That was a double overtime game. And then Spring Arbor, who's number 18. So I don't think anything was bad there. I think only good things in that one. So I see them going up. My stayers, so my receiving votes teams that'll just probably stay where they're at. I got Carroll. They might drop a little bit. You know, they did lose to number 7 Dakota State, but the real loss was to unranked Montana Western. I think that's the one that's going to hurt them a little bit, but they could still stay at the top of the receiving votes. Hastings, they stay receiving votes. Their only loss in the past 2 weeks was to Dakota Wesleyan. Not a bad loss at all. Providence, I don't know, y'all. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I don't know what the Argos are going to do because you know, you were on the edge anyway, so maybe they bump you out completely. You don't have any big wins. You have a 4-game winning streak. That's great. And, I mean, you look at Valley City, who you beat. They beat MSU Northern, and I do have MSU Northern falling out of receiving votes because of that loss. So, I don't know. I really don't know about Providence, in my opinion, y'all. For the fallers, these are the ones that are going to stay in receiving votes, but they're going to come down a little bit. I've got Huntington. They drop in that picture because they got upset by Bethel of Indiana. I got MACU because they lost to Langston. And I just feel like even though it's not a bad loss, but you're going to get penalized. You got to get penalized for losing. And then I got Hope falling all the way to the edge after suffering a GSAC loss to the Masters unranked in overtime. My droppers. These are the teams that I have falling out of the receiving votes picture altogether. Mentioned before, MSU Northern. I think they fall out because you lost to unranked Valley City. Taylor, you're on a 4-game losing streak, including to unranked Bethel of Indiana and that Goshen game alone. Even if you didn't lose to Bethel, you lost to Goshen, that was their first conference win of the season. Yeah, you're going to have to drop out after that one. For USAO, they drop out or are close to it. You know, they're 2-3 in their last 5 games, including unranked losses to John Brown and College of the Ozarks. Not bad teams, but not what you're going to need if you're trying to stay in the receiving votes side of everything. For Faulkner, you lost to unranked Bruin Parker, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. I think you fall out. And Bruin Parker's not a bad team. I just think they're having a bad season, but I think you're going to fall out because of that. And then Cummins of Tennessee, you're on an 8-game losing streak. I can't have you still in the receiving votes. I just can't see that happening. Now, like I always tell y'all, the ones that come out, who's going in? I have marked 100% Taylor, USAO, and Cummins of Tennessee all out. Those are 3 for sure that I'm out. So I'm going to put in 3. The other ones that I mentioned were kind of maybes, you know, MSU Northern and Faulkner. Those 2 are maybes. But the other 3 I have for sure. The for sure need to be in the receiving vote side of things. Bethel of Kansas, 8-game winning streak, including wins over number 20 Friends and handing number 17 Evangel their first conference loss of the season. Enough said. Bethel of Indiana, 3-1 their last 4 games. Their only loss was number 6 St. Francis in overtime by 1. And then you also had wins over receiving votes Taylor at Taylor and receiving votes Huntington at Huntington. Plus, you beat Goshen, who did beat Taylor. So I feel like that you got to throw that in there as well. So I think Bethel of Indiana and Bethel of Kansas, you're in receiving votes. Northwestern, 3-1 their last 4 games. Only lost to number 1 Dordt, so it might as well not really been a loss, an understandable loss. But then you had a big win over number 19 Briarcliff at Briarcliff. Need I say more? So I think those 3 teams will take the 3 teams that I mentioned will be coming out. I do have could-be teams in the receiving vote side of things. I'm looking at Ottawa, Montana Western, and College of the Ozarks. All of them happen to be 3-1 their last 4 games. For Ottawa, big win this past Saturday over number 20 Friends, and their only loss to number 17 Evangel at Evangel in overtime. I think that could be a nice little notch on your cap. Montana Western, obviously you're talking about that big win over Carroll at Carroll, and your only loss to number 18 Rocky Mountain at Rocky Mountain. And then you have College of the Ozarks. They beat receiving votes USAO at USAO, and they lost receiving votes MACU at MACU. So out of those 3, if you ask me, let's say that those 5 that I talked about receiving votes come out, the 3 that I mentioned, Bethel, Northwestern, I would have to say, give me Ottawa because they're the only team out of the next 3 that have a ranked win on their books. Then the last 2, Montana Western, College of the Ozarks. I would have to go Montana Western because College of the Ozarks had a loss to a receiving votes team. Meanwhile, Montana Western had a loss to a top 20 team. Again, not every loss is made the same. That's kind of what it goes down to. But that's my prediction for the polls coming out on Wednesday. Why I think things are going to happen, who I think is going to move up, who I think is going to move down, all that good stuff. Now we're going to get into deep diving some of these games, some of the more important games, in my opinion, for the coming week. I've got 1 game on Tuesday. I've got a couple games on Wednesday, and then I got 1 game on Thursday that I'm going to 2 games on Thursday that I'm going to talk about here. First up, Tuesday, Southern Oregon versus Oregon Tech. The last time these 2 teams played, Oregon Tech won on a back-and-forth game. I watched this one live. I remember watching this one live. Southern Oregon had a chance to tie it multiple times down the stretch. They really did. Josie Ramos for Oregon Tech, she led the way with 14. Olivia Sparge had 13. Tatum Schmarbach had 11, 13, 6, and 3 blocks. She was cooking in that kitchen on the road. Mind you, this was at Southern Oregon. The biggest thing for me from Southern Oregon was Keely Wright. I felt like I was watching her just dominate the ball in terms of the speed, because whether it was a make, whether it was a miss, whatever the case was, I always felt like every time I looked up, she was speeding down the court, ball in hand, pushing the pace. She was, in my opinion, a matchup problem for Oregon Tech's guards that whole game. She had 13 points, 3 steals, 5 rebounds, 6 of 13. She took 13 shots, only 1 3, which kind of shows you where she was living, in the paint, in the mid-range, getting to her spots whenever she wanted to. Bridget McIntyre had a rough 13 points. She shot 4 of 16 and 2 of 10 from 3-point line, but she did have 5 rebounds and 5 steals. I do think, and I've been thinking this since the last time they played, since they played that game, if Bridget has even half of a better game, they win that game. I really do believe that. I mean, the 2 3s she hit were in the third quarter, I believe. She got clean looks multiple times throughout the night. It wasn't all night, but multiple times, and she just missed them. And again, I think she had 2 cracks at tying the game and at the end and just missed. She just missed. So I do think that Oregon Tech survived that game more than Oregon Tech necessarily won, in my opinion. Southern Oregon did get out-rebounded, but the real problem was capitalizing on Oregon Tech turnovers. I remember when we were live setting and we were talking about the game, I said they're forcing turnovers. Oregon Tech had 20 turnovers, and 14 of them were Southern Oregon steals. But they couldn't capitalize off of that in terms of points off turnovers. So you're doing a great job at forcing turnovers, live ball turnovers. I've been talking about a lot these past few weeks. Like, not every turnover is made the same. But now, what do you do with those turnovers? How are you maximizing the extra possession? Because if you're not going to do anything with them, there's no point in even forcing the turnovers in the first place, right? So I do think that's a big part of this game moving into Tuesday. Since that last game, though, Oregon Tech, they're 6-1. They have a win over LC State, and then their only loss to Corbin. Understandable. The defense, though, it's been really impressive for me for the Owls. We're talking about a team that is right now holding opponents to 59 points per game in these last 7, and only 1 game under 10 points when they won. So they've been winning games by double digits. They've been holding teams to under 60 a night. They've done a really, really good job at just making teams feel uncomfortable and making teams have to work for every single possession. That's what you want at this time of the year, especially in this Cascade that is loaded. I'll take this moment to talk about the Cascade standing, kind of update you guys. It might be, again, the closest race in terms of conference because of what we're talking about at what's at stake, meaning number 1 seed and a conference regular season championship. Since the last time that we talked, which was last Friday, when we updated you guys kind of on the standings, things have changed. Obviously, I mentioned all these teams are going to play each other going into this week. Right now, Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon are leading the pack by 1 game over Corbin, College of Idaho, Lewis and Clark State, and Oregon Tech, all of which are tied at 12-4 now. So let y'all know, even though those 2 are tied at 13-3 and are ahead, they're not that far ahead from number 1 to number 6, I believe. Yeah, 6 are still separated by a game, by 1 game. You know what I mean? By half a game, actually. So it's been a heck of a run in the Cascade, but just kind of give you an update on what it's looking like. But yeah, back to the game. Oregon Tech's defense has been on another level in the past few weeks, in the past few games, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do against Southern Oregon, who in the last 7 games is on a 7-game winning streak. They do have wins over LC State and Corbin. The offense, though, Another world. Talking about a team that is averaging almost 79 points per game, 78.9, and their lowest scoring game, this little sample size, has been 64. They still won that game by 20. So the defense has still been great, but I do believe the offense has been a bit of a tick up than normal in my opinion. So I'm excited to see really good defense against really, really good offense. What is going to prevail this time around? My biggest key for this game, it's Bridget and Keely, and more so Bridget. I said at the beginning of this segment, Southern Oregon, in my opinion, lost that game with Bridget shooting 20% from three, which is something she hasn't done since that game. She's had some 25 percentage nights. She has some rough nights, but she hasn't shot 20 or less since that game. She's had 50% games. She's had 33. She's in the 40s. She's been pretty consistent of being above, but she's been definitely above 20. And again, I believe that Southern Oregon lost that game more than Oregon Tech won. Not taking anything away from Oregon Tech, but I just believe Bridget had clean looks. She just missed some of those. And sometimes it comes down to a make or miss game, and especially we talked about the Cascade being a make or miss conference. But I do believe that was the situation. Now, on the Keely side of things, the only reason I bring her name up is because, like I said at the beginning, she seemed to be a matchup problem for the guards, for the perimeter players of Oregon Tech. Her speed was just on another level. She don't even got to score. I just feel like she's going to be able to push the pace, and that's the type of pace that Southern Oregon wants to play at. Make or miss, I'm running down the court. I'm pushing the ball up the court. Honestly, don't push. Take the ball yourself, because her end-to-end court speed, I need to time it, because I do believe it's got to be like 5 seconds or less. It has to be. It has to be. With the basketball mind I had. So I just feel like she's going to be able to give Bridget more open shots. If I'm pushing down the sideline as a guard and I've got a shooter in the corner, that defender has to choose. Either I'm stopping the ball, which is what you're taught at a young age, and now it's an easy kick out to a shooter that's going to hit the best three she's going to look in that corner, or you stay on the shooter, also understandable because you don't leave strong side corner, and now I've got a right-hand layup. She's got great touch around the rim as well. So I just feel like it's going to be a situation where these two guards, the backcourt of Southern Oregon, is the biggest but the biggest factor for me in this one on both sides of the ball. I have SOU winning. I do believe the Red Raiders will win this game, but I do think it's going to be close, and I do think it comes down to how do Keely and Bridget play off each other, how well do they play together, and how well or how hard does Oregon Tech make their lives and force the bigs or force the wing players to have to be the ones to go out and not just score but create for everybody else. Again, Bridget will have so much gravity towards her because of her shooting ability, where, again, they're probably going to do no help off of her, no midline, all these type of different defensive schemes and not let her get any clean looks, forcing everybody else to score. We'll see if that situation, or if they're going to run with one-on-one coverage and just see what happens on that. But I do have Southern Oregon coming out with a pretty close win in this one. Now we're going to jump over to Wednesday and talk about the Crossroads, give you all a quick update of how the Crossroads is looking from a standing standpoint. Been a few things to move, not anything crazy, but a few things have moved a little bit. When we talk about the Crossroads, right now, Marion and St. Francis still tied at 12-2. Spring Arbor 11-3, Huntington 9-5. Indiana Wesleyan and Bethel are both at 7-7, and then Taylor rounds out the playoff picture at 6-8. Grace, Mount Vernon, and Goshen pretty much are out of the playoff contention. They cannot get in. I mean, Taylor is on a 4-game losing streak, so who knows? But I'm pretty sure to say, and pretty safe in saying, that those are the 6 teams, or those are the 8 teams that will be in the conference tournament. Now, seeding is still completely up for grabs. Obviously, number 1 seed still up for grab, especially because St. Francis has that win over Marion. Spring Arbor seems pretty comfortable being the 3rd seed. Huntington, they're pretty comfortable being the 4th seed. Now, Bethel, Indiana Wesleyan, you're fighting for that. Being on either side of the bracket, very important. Very important. So, lots of still be decided in terms of standings for the Crossroads. The game that I want to touch on for these Crossroads Wednesday night, Spring Arbor versus Bethel. Big reason is, and I do believe Spring Arbor will win. I'm not picking an upset, but Bethel has been on a little bit of a heater, y'all. I do believe this is going to be more of, can Spring Arbor stifle Bethel's run the past few games? Because the last time these two teams played, Spring Arbor only squeaked by a 5-point game. It was not a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. It was a 5-point game when it was all said and done. And the pace is what I really noticed about this game, because both teams shot under 55 field goal attempts. Both teams made 19 of those attempts. So it was a much slower pace game for both teams, especially for Spring Arbor, which is something I'm going to come back to later in this segment. SAU did make a big impact, though, from a free throw lines perspective. They shot 20 of 26. Meanwhile, Bethel went 12 of 13. So they got double what free throw attempts Bethel had, and they made 8 more of those attempts. So that's, I do believe, kind of came down to it, being able to capitalize on those free throw attempts. Now, Bethel did shoot better threes, though. They doubled the Cougars from 3 to 6 in terms of the three-point percentage, in terms of three-point makes. An extra 9 points, but kind of cancel that out with those extra 8 free throws that you did get. So kind of cancels it out in the end. Spring Arbor also had a great day inside. They had 30 paint points. Bethel only had 18. Very important note to make as well, especially the way Spring Arbor likes to play, pushing the pace, getting in the paint touch, whether with by drive, by post touches, by rebounds, those type of things. So very important to mention that when we're playing against Spring Arbor. Since this last game, I should say, Bethel is 5-3. They've got wins over Huntington and Taylor, both on the road, very important, plus a 1-point loss to St. Francis in overtime. Watch that game, especially the ending of that game. Crazy game. So this Bethel team, like I mentioned, they're surging. Like there is a world where they're only 2 games behind Huntington. So is Indiana Wesleyan, to be fair. They're only 2 games behind them, and they hold the tiebreaker now, I'm pretty sure, because this was their second win against Huntington. I'm going to double-check my notes here. They beat Huntington earlier, obviously, this month, and they beat them early this season. So, yes, they hold the tiebreaker. So, if they can get to an even situation between themselves and Huntington, they win that situation. They win that tiebreaker. So, Bethel could easily make this a playoff preview, y'all, because Spring Arbor is going to sit at 3. They're not going anywhere from there. So now we're looking at a situation where this game is a lot more important for the future. It sets you up in terms of, scheme, adjustments, all those type of things. Now for Spring Arbor, they're 6-2 in their last 8. They're on a 4-game winning streak, and they just beat Indiana Wesleyan in overtime. Indiana Wesleyan is not playing like the same Indiana Wesleyan from earlier this season. They look much better. They seem to be a much more effective team on the road, which is always my biggest storyline for them middle of the season. Like the road woes were legit, and they need to get figured out, which they seem to have. They also seem to just be the kryptonite of the St. Francis Cougars. I don't know. That could also be a situation here. But both teams are surging. Both teams are on a little bit of a winning streak here, and both teams have really quality wins under their belt since the last time that they've played earlier this season. My biggest key for this game: tempo, and tempo from the Bethel side. I'm going to throw some numbers at you guys real quick. These are the field goal attempts for Bethel in their last 8 games. 60, 75, 52, 53, 54, 50. Let me say that again. 60, 75, 52, 53, 56, 58, 54 in overtime. 62. That averages out to about 58.8, so 59 field goal attempts per game in the last 8 games. Not bad. Spring Arbor, 61, 68, 67, 59, 59, 61, 88, 64 in that overtime game against IWU. That averages about 65.9, so about 66 field goal attempts. Why would I bring up field goal attempts? When we talk about pace, when we talk about tempo and playing fast, all this kind of stuff, people look at scoring. Understandably so. If you're playing fast, you're probably going to get a lot more points. But what should that really be judged by? Your field goal attempts. Because if I'm pushing the pace, in theory, I should be getting more field goal shots, more field goal attempts in the game. I should not get the same number of field goal attempts that a team that's walking the ball up the court, that's playing late in the shot clock, I should not have the same number of attempts that they do if I'm pushing the pace, if I'm hustling, doing all these type of things. I understand. I can hear people screaming at me already about, offensive rebounds, turnover. And yes, you're all right in that situation. But even still, if I shoot the ball with 25 on the shot clock because I'm playing quick, I get a good chance of getting offensive rebound. If I shoot the ball with 5 seconds on the shot clock, I could still get an offensive rebound, but now what if that's an air ball? I don't get that rebound. That's a violation. I'm going the other way. At least if I airballed 25 seconds, I could get that airballed rebound and be able to play off of that. So at the end of the day, I think field goal attempts are the best way to judge everything from a standpoint of, hey, who is actually playing faster in this game? I think if Bethel can do what they did in the first game, which is slow the tempo down and allow for low field goal attempts, they will give themselves the best chance of winning. It's proven that Spring Arbor can still win in these type of games. I don't think that they're struggling to play slow or they can't play in the half court. Nothing like that. But it just will magnetize their ability from the Bethel side of things to actually try and get something, keep it slow, keep it grinded out, frustrate Spring Arbor. Because Spring Arbor, yes, they can play in the slower pace style, but they want to run. They want to play fast. They want to make you uncomfortable. So how do we do that? You got to run. You got to push. What do? You take that away from them. You're not going to take it away completely. You're not going to turn it into a snail pace of a game, but If you're able to hold things down, make them play deep into the shot clock, both sides of the ball, make them have to guard, make them do all these type of things, it could frustrate them. So that's what I'm looking at for this game. I think Spring Arbor comes out with a victory, but keep an eye on the field goal attempt side of things. If this game goes under 60 like it did last time, that's probably why Bethel wins. If it goes above 60 and it's a double-digit win for Spring Arbor, I guarantee you that's why. Because it went above 60 and Bethel just does not have the speed to be able to stay with Spring Arbor for a full 40. Maybe a quarter, maybe even a half, maybe even 3/4. But I promise you, for a full 40, I don't think that Bethel can handle what Spring Arbor can do from that side of the ball. Now we're going to go on the Thursday game for this week that I think will be very interesting. The first Thursday game that I'm going to talk about is the SAC. Update the SAC standings. Like I said, Langston, Nelson, MACU, College of Ozarks, and USAO have all clinched a spot in the conference tournament. After that, that is the first 5. The next 3, Wayland Baptist, John Brown, Texas Wesleyan, are, as of right now, in those spots. And then Southwestern Christian is tied with Texas Wesleyan for the final spot at 6-12. The game that I'm looking at, MACU versus Nelson. MACU is looking to muck up the top of the Sooner Athletic, because a win by MACU pretty much solidifies Langston winning the conference regular season championship, because right now they hold a half-game lead over Nelson, 15-2, 15-3. And a win here for MACU puts Nelson at 15-4, makes it really hard for them to have to try and catch Langston, even though there is that season finale against Langston in the not so far distant future. And then if Nelson wins, what that opens up is the possibility of MACU not having home court advantage in the first round, because what I'm looking at here is MACU is 14-4. College of the Ozarks is 13-5. If MACU loses and College of the Ozarks wins, now they are tied in the record 14-5 each. Opens up the possibility for some things. And if USAO wins their game, now you're looking at them being 13-6, and things look very interesting. Obviously, I don't know off the top of my head who each team is playing per se, but there is a world where that could happen, right? So things are looking very interesting for MACU in terms of home court advantage in that first round. For this game, the last time these two teams played, MACU did win at home by 2, even though Nelson had a big 19-7 fourth quarter that shrunk the deficit, obviously, big time. This game was a game, honestly, where both teams deserved to win, but only one could. I was looking at the box score, kind of refreshing my memory, and nothing stood out to me that was like, wow, Nelson did this bad, or MACU really took advantage of this. Like, everything was pretty even, to be honest with you guys. Even both teams had big performances from each other. MACU had 3 players in double figures, led by Talia Lee. She had a near double-double with 17-9. And then Caitlin Jordan did get the double-double at 15-10. Then for Nelson, they had their own double-double performance. Paris Miller, 14-10. And then their leader in scoring was Kate Miller with 15 points. So very similar, even from a standpoint of what the team's players actually produced out on that court. Now, this is where things look a little bit interesting. Since the last game, though, Nelson's on a 7-game winning streak that was almost snapped this past weekend by Southwestern Christian until Ashley Gonzalez hit the one-leg 3 to win the game. But the team has beaten College of the Ozarks, USAO, road, and home respectively. But at home, that's where I wanted to kind of focus this on, because this game that we're talking about between themselves and MACU will be at Nelson. They're putting up, them being Nelson, 77 points per game at home during this streak. That's 4 games, right? On the road, they're at 76.3. 3 games. I understand the sample size is not correct. That's 40 minutes that we're missing. A lot can happen in 40 minutes. But the reason I wanted to still use these numbers is because they're getting a big boost in the averages from road and home, for the road games, I should say, with a 91-point performance in one of their games on the road. For hindsight, for retrospect, the other 2 games that they had, it was 64 and 74. So which one do you think is more believable? That they're going to put up 91 again on the road, or that they're going to put up closer to 64, 74 in that range? So that's why I say at home, things look a little bit different than on the road. And even from a standpoint of defense, at home, they're holding opponents at 66.5 points per game. On the road, that's 69.3. All averages were pretty much even, nothing crazy that really stood out. But even still, that's a significant difference in terms of what we're doing home and road. And even from the standpoint of opponents, 79 points per game at home for themselves, 69 for their opponents. That's a 10-point difference. So it's very important to make for MACU going into Nelson's home. They're really good. This Nelson team is really good at home. You cannot go in there complacent or satisfied about what happened last game because they will come back and take advantage of that home crowd. For MACU, though, they're 6-2 in their last 8 games. They did lose to Texas Wesleyan, which is not a great game, not a great loss, especially because that was right after beating Nelson. But since then, they were on a 5-game winning streak, and that winning streak included USAO and College of the Ozarks. Multiple games over 10 points that they won by, even a close loss to Langston by 3 in these past 8 games. Biggest key for me is who wants it more. And by who wants it more, I'm more so talking about, can Nelson use that home crowd that they've clearly been able to thrive off of in their past 7 games? Can they use that to get the monkey off their back that is MACU? You knock them off. You pretty much make it just a 2-horse race between yourself and Langston, for the championship of the regular season. You don't have to worry about MACU again till the playoffs because you probably will see them again in the postseason, possibly. So I do believe I'm looking at Nelson to pull out the victory here, really on the strength of the home court, the crowd, all that type of stuff. That's what I'm looking at for this game. Last game that we're going to talk about a little more in depth than the others. Still Thursday. It's going to be the Red River, where we're talking about Texas A&M San Antonio versus LSU Alexandria. The Jags versus the Generals. Similar to some of these other games I've talked about. I don't think there's an upset coming. I don't. I do have the Jags winning this one. But can an upset come? That's what we're going to look at here. Because the last time these two teams played, the Jags handled business, 85-76. But the game felt closer than it really was. Because even from the standpoint of the box score, both teams, it was a 1-point game going to the half. The Jags just kind of handled business in the second half, really. And then both teams had a big scoring performance. For the Jags, it was Kiera Sanderlin with 21 points and 6 steals off the bench. And then for the Generals, it was Sydney Person who had 30 points. So both teams had a very impressive scoring performance. Both teams had one player that really stood out from the rest. But even still, multiple double-figure scoring performances for both teams in this game. The Jags also took advantage of 19 general fouls that led to 22 for 27 from the free throw line for the Jags. Meanwhile, the Generals went 16 of 19, plus 26 turnovers, 8 of them from the Jags in terms of steals. Since last game, the Jags are 6-2 after dropping their most recent game in North American, which snapped the 5-game winning streak at the time. So the Jags could have been coming into this game on a 6-game winning streak. Had the Jags won that game, this would have actually helped LSU-A because now, in terms of standings, they would have been tied with North American going into this week. Because of that, now you're looking at possibly the North American team holding a little bit more of a lead now. Right now, they're 11-7. LSU-A is 10-8. They can still tie them after this week, but now it's a little bit, could have made this game a little more interesting, in my opinion. You're looking at this for the Generals. This is a very impressive, this is going to be a very big test because they're 5-4 in their last 9 games. You know what I mean? So that's something to note. And the inconsistencies have been there. They have been there, y'all, because we're talking about a team. This is the last 9 games for the Generals. They lost to the Jags, which started a 3-game losing streak. Tough. They then bounced back with a 3-game winning streak. All right, cool. Then they dropped 2 in a row, and now they're riding a 2-game winning streak coming into this game. So the inconsistencies are there, right? And for the Jags, this is going to be their second road game in 6 games. That'll also start a quick 2-game road trip for them, for the Jaguars. So there's a couple things here to keep in mind from an outside perspective. For me, the biggest key is simple. Full 40. Who can play a full 40? Because in the first time these two teams played, the Jags did not have a great first half. I mean, they had a good first half. You know what I mean? They had a better second half. So clearly you can have done more in that first half. For the Generals, you had a good first half, didn't have a great second half. For the past 9 games, you have been inconsistent. I'm looking mainly at the Generals. If this Generals team that comes in is the one that was on a 3-game winning streak, I think the Jags are going to have their hands full dealing with the Generals. But if it's the team that was on a 3-game losing streak, that was a 2-game losing streak, like that team, you're looking at a blowout. It's just that's what's going to be. Because I just don't see a team that can be this inconsistent being able to knock off one of the best teams in the Red River. A team right now that's 15-3. A team right now that has Texas Arcana breathing down their necks at 14-3 for that second seed. So there's a lot to be had right now in this game for both teams. LSU-A looking for some playoff seeding, some playoff solidification. Texas A&M San Antonio looking for, like I mentioned, that second auto bid from the Red River in terms of ARC standings. And if you finish second in the Red River, you're probably going to be the second Red River team in terms of ARC standings when the season is all said and done. Yes, I hear y'all screaming at me because I talked about the turnovers earlier and the free throws and all that kind of stuff, and that's all valid. But I believe if the Generals have a consistent game, those things will even out. You won't get as many foul calls against you. You won't turn the ball over as much. If you're being consistent, those things will kind of even out. I truly believe that. I go Jags simply because of the inconsistencies that I've seen for the past couple of games now for the Generals. With that being said, that means that the inconsistencies could help the Generals, and they come in really aggressive or they can't miss or whatever the case is. But I just feel like for a full 40, I'm taking the Jags over the Generals in this one. That's going to do it for this episode of The Report. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Number 50 coming up later this week on Friday. Got a few things planned in the works. Some big announcements coming up soon. And, of course, conference tournament time is right around the corner, guys. So got a few things planned up for there as well. Hope you guys are enjoying everything. We're here, y'all. We're in the home stretch of the regular season. 2-3 weeks left. And then we're going to get the ball rolling in terms of postseason action. Can't wait. Hope to catch y'all there. Again, like, comment, subscribe. Let's try and get us to 100 subscribers by the end of the regular season. Maybe. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.